Hello, everybody. Welcome to
Hello.
today's live stream event, The Real State of Equipment Finance, Risk, Returns, and the Road Ahead. I'm Lisa Rafter, publisher of Monitor, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. The equipment finance industry is standing at a crossroads. Tariffs, interest rate swings, supply chain issues, AI, automation, and the rise of private credit. All these factors are converging to challenge the way we think, plan, and compete. So today we're going to cut through the noise and bring you a roundtable with real leaders talking about real challenges and the strategic moves they're making right now. We're going to explore trade policy and tariffs, which sectors are hot, the impact of bank-owned lenders and private credit, AI and automation, and how companies are adapting underwriting, tech strategy, and leadership to stay competitive through the next economic cycle. The conversation we're going to have today is designed to give you the real story, what's happening in the trenches, what's keeping execs up at night, and how you're positioning your companies to win. Before we dive in, I want to give a big thank you to our sponsor for today's event, Converge by Monitor. Brought to you by Monitor and hosted by Jim Kelly, the former head of vendor finance for GE Capital and Wells Fargo, Converge is a half-day workshop-style virtual event happening on July 24th. It's designed to help equipment finance leaders rethink and rebuild customer strategy and ultimately create actionable customer growth plans. In just 5 focused hours, participants will roll up their sleeves and collaborate in breakout sessions facilitated by 16 industry leaders to refine and modernize their approaches to customer identification, acquisition, retention, and growth. And to help participants implement what they build, all attendees will walk away with a tactical, data-driven Converge customer playbook. It's a post-event resource filled with data, research, tools, benchmarks from 4,000 plus equipment buyers and sellers, in addition to facilitator insights, breakout session takeaways, and guided templates to help teams apply new strategies, track progress, and drive customer growth long after the event ends. So if you want to lead the future of customer growth in the industry, don't miss Converge. Use that QR code on the screen or the link in the chat below to learn more and register. So now let's bring us back to today's event. I'd like to introduce today's moderator and panelists. We're thrilled to have Craig Ault moderating today's discussion. And today, Craig will be joined by 3 exceptional leaders who are shaping the future of equipment finance. Kirk Phillips, President and Chief Executive Officer of Wintrust Asset Finance. Renee Paradise, President and Chief Operating Officer of Auxilior Capital Partners. And Miles Herman, CEO of Leaf Commercial Capital. We're incredibly grateful to have all 3 of you with us today, and I can't wait for all of you to hear what they have to say. So over to you, Craig, can begin our live stream.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that. I want to welcome each of you and thank you for sharing your time and talent with the industry. To those who registered, we want to thank you for joining the Monitor Live event. Your time investment today will be about an hour. I will ask a question, pose it to the panel, then select which panelist I want to primarily address the question. We may move on, or another panelist may provide an additional insight. Anyone in attendance who has a question, please enter your question in the chat. We will answer as many of those questions as possible. Questions today were devised by the Monitor staff. They were sealed and kept under heavy security until now, so we're ready to go. So with that, let me start with the first question, and that one is, let's see, what do I want to pick today here? Let's go with, first question is, are you seeing customers accelerate or delay projects in anticipation of tariff changes, and how is this impacting your pipeline? Miles, I'm going to start you off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Craig. and happy to be here today. You know, it's so interesting because we came into this year with a lot of optimism and pent up demand we felt that was out there in the business community, and we began to hear something about tariffs coming down the pike. And in Q1, what we saw, people were pretty reactive. There was a lot of front loading that happened, and so we saw a lot of acceleration of projects that people were doing and across all the industries. Most of them were aimed at stockpiling and building up their inventories, beating future price increases, locking in what they have, and getting as much product in off the ships. And then what we began to see over the once Liberation Day hit and people began to understand, there was really kind of almost like a slowdown in business that we saw. Um, we track a lot of things. We saw incoming cargo coming down and things that were on ships. There was a lot of confusion. We saw ship orders being canceled, and then we began to hear of more improvements happening. And so I think really what we've kind of take away from this is that the tariffs created a lot of uncertainty early on. I think giving that breathing period and pushing things out to July gave people a pause. Um, the uncertainty really does not fuel predictability for people to make long-term investments. And so what we're still seeing is that people that need equipment for what their work is, because something's either worn out or it just absolutely needs replacement, they're going out and doing that. But we still are seeing some impact here where projects are delayed. Tariff pricing in some instances is either being absorbed by the providers of the equipment, or it's being priced into some of this. Sometimes it's passed on embedded in the pricing, so you really can't tell how much the cost increase was. And other times we're actually seeing certain line items on invoices. So I think all this kind of speaks to where we are as an industry, which is lack of tariff predictability and people trying to change their supply chains, what they can, where they can. They're trying to buy from either cheaper tariff areas, and or they're buying in the States. So I think we're seeing some of that, but we saw some impact in some of the local economies, particularly Southern California, seemed to get hit. So we saw, as we've been doing some of our underwritings, we saw some of that affecting that. So we, again, just to summarize, early on, we saw delay in acceleration and getting things done. Now we've seen much more delays really happening in the macro sense, Craig.
Thanks, Miles. And would you anticipate this to be your vision through the remainder of 25?
Yeah, actually, I think I'm a bit more bullish than some. I think that things will kind of steady themselves out. We have a very resilient economy right now, and smart business people, and I think we'll figure it out. So I know there's early on a lot of predictions around recessions, and I think that we'll see maybe some business slowdown, but I think we'll get through it. And I think also depending on what comes through, the policy around the bills that go through Congress will ultimately shape investment. There's the Senate bill most recently has language in around business interest deductibility and around 100% expensing. So as some of these elements come into fold, I think that'll be very attractive if there's some permanency to the 2017 tax cuts.
Thank you. Sounds like another project for Capital Connections too. Appreciate that, Miles. Renee, how are current potential future tariffs affecting your customers' equipment purchasing decisions? Renee, that's to you.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you to the Monitor staff for putting this together. I think these are important topics to discuss. I think that Miles highlighted a couple of important points, which is certainly the biggest impact that we've seen from tariffs and how customers are making decisions is a lack of certainty. It's very hard to predict and budget and forecast what your needs are going to be, particularly when you don't know what the cost forecasting is going to be. So I think that's been a really big part of customers' decisions and looking at what the ROI is on any investment that they might be making from an equipment purchasing perspective. The other challenge that we've really seen has been some supply chain disruptions, particularly in customized pieces of equipment that may need, particular assets inclusions that may not have been onshored yet. And so we're really looking at a lot of, again, sort of supply chain distortions and some issues with customers actually getting the equipment that they have purchased. I think there is reason to be optimistic in a few points too, also as Miles pointed out. Certainly we're seeing customers make decisions about used equipment and how used equipment might get deployed just as effectively as new equipment. But I think the uncertainty really is creating a climate of caution for many of our customers. But it might be creating an opportunity for us in the finance space, particularly as leasing becomes more interesting as a mechanism for hedging that volatility in the pricing. So it's good and bad.
Well, as we've heard oftentimes, this industry is filled with a bunch of entrepreneurial, hardworking people, and if there needs to be a pivot, they'll find a way to adapt and do the research necessary. So, thank you for that, Renee. Kirk, what partnerships or strategic relationships are becoming more important in this environment, and how are you thinking about build versus buy decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. And again, thank you to the Monitor for this opportunity to chat with other leaders about some very important topics right now. First of all, I'd say all of our relationships and partnerships are very important to us at all times. But right now, I think it's exceptionally important to stay close with the front end, the vendors, the suppliers, to make sure that you understand, what their pipeline looks like, what challenges they're addressing. At the same time, being close to your clients and understanding what areas that they can postpone or delay as they try to, navigate this environment. At the same time, I think, being close to your back office providers is very important because, again, we're seeing, new challenges, new products, new things coming on. And so making sure that you're aligned with your back office, is very important right now. And then as far as build versus buy, our successes that we've had have always been focused around people and not necessarily, the organization that we were looking at. It's the key people. Are the people, do they have the experience? Do they have the depth? Do they have the breadth of experience to come in and start and launch a new opportunity? And so for us, we've always, like I say, we've just had a lot more success in finding the right people versus the right organizations to bring on.
Well, Kurt, you and all the people at Wintrust certainly have been renowned for creating a culture and an environment that focuses on quality people. And obviously that's a lead in what you're trying to do there. So thank you for sharing that with us. Miles, which industries are you most bullish on for equipment investment over the next 18 months? and what is driving that optimism?
Well, let's start out first. What is driving the optimism? And again, depending upon the day and the month and all, we've all seen the different views around where the probability of recession is, and so again, they were higher earlier in the spring. They've come down a bit. Some are still showing that we'll have growth this year, and then slow down next year. So I think it's more realistic that we'll see some slowdown over some period of time compared to the prior year. But if I look at there's a balancing act between a number of things. Trade tensions, the geopolitical landscape, monetary policy, inflation, and labor. So I think when you balance those out, where we see expansion still happening heavily in the tech spend, I don't think you can open up, go online and not see the word AI, AI any place in every industry. So, there still seems to be a lot of I remember the early days of the internet in the 90s, a lot of people being enamored with it. And I think it's going to get its run, and people are making investments in particularly also not just big businesses, small businesses. I think you'll still see investment going on in the tech spend, also in data centers, continued expansion around there. And it's not just the hardware or the technology piece, but also think about the climate control systems that go into these buildings, facilities. And so then you tie back into energy, and we're seeing, expansion of energy projects all around the U.S., really multi-million dollars all the way down to, substantially smaller pieces. I look at waste as still a big industry that a lot of people are really active in and figuring out that. And also packaging. We're seeing a lot of interest around packaging and, what kind of packaging can be changed in a way that it's much more ecologically friendly. If I go over to healthcare, we're seeing a lot of expansion in healthcare. Certainly the technology piece, again, how it fits in, but also record keeping. Moving into a couple other sectors, logistics and warehousing, we're still seeing expansion there. Earlier this year, there was questions around shortages of warehousing. There's been, I'm based right outside in Philadelphia, and right outside of Philadelphia, there's been a heavy influx of warehousing that's been added. And then lastly, anybody that drives along a roadway today, there's construction. I don't care whether you're in Texas or California or where it is, there's construction every place. So anything that's tied into some of the road projects and engineering firms, things like that, you still have that. And depending upon how things work, we're still seeing expansion in accounting practices, accounting businesses. So those are all those, some of the sectors that we still see expansion really going. And, and it's being validated by what traffic we're seeing in terms of activity for applications and business fundings.
Thanks, Miles. Renee, how about you at Auxilior? What are you feeling in terms of those industry optimisms? Renee? Did I lose Renee?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Looks like my machine was muted.
Okay.
Miles hit a lot of them, and certainly a lot of those would be redundant to what we're seeing from a volume perspective. I think we can all agree that our roads, bridges, our infrastructure is really in need of a lot of attention. And so where we're seeing a lot of the driving is in large construction projects. Certainly large construction projects as it relates to data centers, both the construction of the data center itself, as well as the infrastructure that needs to go into it in order to maintain those types of projects have been huge. So we're seeing still a lot of demand in the construction space. So that would be our primary area of focus. I would also echo what Miles said about technology. You know, the idea of autonomous assets and different types of equipment that may be able to address the labor shortages, as well as to provide data on the effectiveness of the machine, is where we're seeing a lot of push in those types of trends.
Great. Thanks, Renee. Kirk, you want to have anything from your perspective on some areas of industry optimistic for your next 18 months?
And I think Miles and Renee covered most of them. Again, like I said, Miles touched on this earlier, you know, like thinking about the areas of growth with data centers and things. When we think about, you know, all the technology that has to go in those, but there's foundational things that go in there as well. As he mentioned, you know, HVAC, but you've got the construction side of it as well, energy generation, you know, and seeing a big push in more distributed energy opportunities. So, you know, again, I think as our economy pivots to bring more onshoring, it's going to create, you know, opportunities across almost all industries. It's just up to us to kind of keep our finger on the pulse and keep our eyes and ears open to see where those opportunities are, and then use our value add to go in there and assist. So,
Kirk, do you feel you've got the right all the right departments with their finger on the pulse, so to speak, or are there some areas that you think either using AI as a support to the personnel that might be refined further? How do you feel about the current status of the team ready for those kinds of necessary adjustments, perhaps?
well, I've got the best team in the industry, so absolutely we're prepared. Um, but no,
I,
you touch on a
I
couple of
teed that
things.
up too easy.
Um, no, we have some great people here at Wintrust, and but you did make mention, you know, is where does AI fit into all of this? And I know there's a lot of dialogue around it and a lot of interest, and I think everybody's, you know, trying to figure it out. And it's going to be interesting to see how it develops within our industry. I definitely think there is um, going to be the opportunity to use AI to, you know, more closely target and focus your client base and lining up their needs better, you know, and being ahead of that. I think there's going to be, you know, the opportunity to use AI from a processing standpoint to, you know, again, take over some of the routine manual things, but then also AI to be going in and overlaying the database. You know, we as equipment lessors and lenders have a tremendous amount of data. And so how can we use AI to go and mine that data, make our, you know, to help make our, you know, again, prospecting more efficient, to make our decisioning better, you know, to mitigate risk. So I think it's going to be, you know, a developing tool. But at the end of the day, and call me old school, been doing this for a long time, but you know, you're never going to completely eliminate the human touch. Relationships and face-to-face contact are still invaluable, you know, and getting business done. So I don't worry about getting replaced by a machine, but boy, if it can help me, I'm sure going to take advantage of it.
Good. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for that. So, Miles, let's take a look at small and medium businesses, SMBs. They're often perceived as the backbone of the economy. How do banks support their financing needs beyond traditional loans? Do collateral secured products like receivables or equipment financing play a part in that support?
Yeah, great question. And when we go ahead and we think about it, you know, a lot of a lot of banking is centered around working and supporting small business. I can tell you we're part of M&T Bank, and tremendous focus there on business banking. And there's a lot of collaboration that we support as a bank-owned equipment finance arm of the bank that is centered around small business. So what we're looking for is, really getting together with the small businesses, really identifying what it is that they need that's going to help them continue to grow their businesses. And when we look at it, it's the equipment finance pieces of it, but we also can bring to bear some of the other tools that banks have available that make it attractive. And so over the years, people have kind of vacillated. Sometimes people want to work closer with banks. Other times, fintech got a rise over 10, 15 years ago because there was a whole segment of small business that was underserved. So I think really what we're seeing today is kind of a reemergence of really looking at what is it that the small business company needs to be successful in the marketplace. And sometimes it's really varying depending upon the nature of that business and where they are. And what each of us that are focused in the small business sector are trying to really ascertain is, what are the key integral parts, and making sure that we're able to go ahead and meet them. So it's not about just, financing one more, invoice or one more order, but it's really sitting down in a consultative manner with the small business owners and really helping them ascertain, what's out there and being strategic for them. So I think those are really what's helping them to really differentiate in how they're going to do their business and how they're going to grow their businesses.
Do the collateral secured products, are they making a difference? Are you changing your position on that at all?
Again, certainly we do a lot of tech financing. We do a lot in the software industry. So, again, everybody puts different value on different things. So I will tell you that secured financing is important in certain sectors that are out there. You still have asset firms that really put a lot of weighting on the value of the asset. And so that really helps some of those firms to be able to get the equipment that they need. There are others that, don't put as much stock into it. So I think it really varies based upon the sector and the industry and the equipment, Craig.
All right. Kirk, I know you've got your Wintrust is divided into several different groups, and you've got a specialty finance group that looks at small ticket items. Can you address this perspective maybe from that aspect and give us your perspective, Kirk?
And I think, again, I think Miles touched on it. I mean, small businesses, make up 90% of the businesses throughout the U.S. So they're a very important part, to our economy. And, again, being able to get close to them and understand the drivers of their business, and then, customizing a financial product to help them grow that business. Again, being part of a bank-owned equipment finance and leasing organization, there's a lot of synergies that we can bring and other things from the bank that we can provide to those small business owners besides just secured lending or leasing. Again, we've got ABL products, products for guidance lines of credit and things like that, cash and treasury management. So again, we really get in and try to align ourselves to understand what exactly do they need, and how can we help them, and bring that expertise to bear.
Good. Thanks. Kurt, keep your mic on because I'm going to come right back with you with another one. So
Okay.
Are bank-owned equipment finance companies becoming more aggressive in the market? And in which segments are you seeing the most competition?
Well, again, that's a softball answer, or question. The banks are definitely back. Again, after the issue of, COVID, and then more recently the SVB and Signature issues of 2023, banks are kind of getting back to the pre-COVID level of involvement. And doing that, a lot of them are trying to make up, quite frankly, for a little bit of lost time and trying to regain or protect market share. And again, I think this is borne out if you look at the ELFA data. Um, you know, Through April, new business volume, banks were up 34%, where captives and independents were down 36 and 4% respectively. So, without a doubt, banks are back. And again, I think we're seeing them, across a lot of different segments. The thing about banks is they are fairly agnostic. They're trying to protect their footprint. They're trying to engage with all the customers, in their marketplace. And so, we've certainly seen them, active, across you know, the broad spectrum of industries, whether it's construction, technology is one that we're seeing a lot of. Software leasing, we're seeing a lot more banks playing in that space as well. But again, all the traditional transportation, aircraft has been, corporate air is making a nice resurgence as well. So, banks are here. They have some built-in advantages, but they also have some built-in disadvantages.
Yeah. All right. Enough of the softball stuff then. We do have a question that before I move back to those there, Kelvin had issued a question earlier, and I'll throw this out. Have you guys seen any interesting approaches to using AI to improve underwriting quality or speed? I'll leave that open to the panel.
Yeah, Craig, I'll jump in. We have begun to take a look at how AI can help improve some of our credit scoring metrics. So we use credit scoring quite a bit in our business as a small ticket underwriter. And so what we're looking at are the analytic sides of AI and what it's been able to help us identify, the different trends, not only the historic trends, but also the forward-looking trends. So where are some of the, early stage to late stage delinquencies coming from? Where are we seeing greater activity? So not only are we using it to help pinpoint from a risk point of view, but we're also utilizing it to help us begin to identify where to go hunt for some other business that may be beneficial. So that helps us from that standpoint to take a look at both the risk side as well as the opportunity side of the sales model.
Okay.
I
Barbara
might-
also wanted to know. I'm sorry, Renee, go ahead, please.
I might just add to Miles's comments that, one of the things that AI is going to do for the industry is real-time data aggregation. So you're going to be able to look at, or we're looking at today, all the components that would go into an underwriting package. And rather than someone having to find that individually, we're able to aggregate that data almost instantaneously using AI. So I think probably the speed of collecting the data will dramatically change as banks and finance companies continue to explore how to use the tools.
Great. Thanks, Renee. Barbara Griffin added on to that about the delinquencies and late payment activity. How are you all seeing that be addressed thus far in 25?
And hop in there. It's been, frankly, a little surprising. We haven't seen any really significant upticks across, all of our platforms, whether it's a small ticket, mid, large environment, and so and I think again, this is kind of where the perception versus reality. We read about a lot of noise in our economy and a lot of these changes, but I think fundamentally, a lot of businesses are, doing okay. I won't say great, but they're doing okay. So, you look at the ELFA data, and then I know our own internal data, we're not seeing the big uptick yet. We keep expecting it, but every month that goes by, it's like, okay, well, maybe this is not as bad as we thought.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Renee, you mentioned technology a couple of times, upgrade cycles. Can you talk about how the upgrade cycles are playing in driving demand, particularly with that AI and automation equipment that you were referring to? Can you talk a little bit about that, please, Renee?
Sure. So the view that we're seeing from customers is that the spend on automation investments is just becoming much easier to justify, because the ROI on many of these types of investments, once you've trained individuals on how to use the tools, is remarkable. So we are definitely seeing this as an imperative for many companies. The use of automation, obviously reduces downtime. The use of AI can help predict when a machine's going to need maintenance. It's going to help predict, the maintenance requirements. And that just in and of itself creates a level of efficiency, especially in a time where we've got a certain level of uncertainty. Those predictabilities and being able to look out into the future is really important. In our business, we're obviously seeing gains in decision times. We're seeing gains in documentation preparation. We're seeing a lot of improvements in quality. And we'll, just in our business, we're going to continue to invest. But the increased demand from customers for autonomous types of assets, dealing with ways to mitigate labor shortages. I mean, we all see it in our daily lives when we walk into a fast food store and you've got a kiosk instead of a human being sitting there taking your order. So, we are seeing a lot of demand and upgrades in those tools that deploy additional technology, particularly AI or AI-enabled technology.
Mm. Renee, how many, like if you could percent it or department wise, is AI used in your company today?
We have AI being used probably in about 40% of our departments. We use it on whole different, in all different types of ways. Certainly in our financial planning and reporting, it's used. We're using it definitely in our portfolio management teams, our credit teams, our documentation teams. So I would say, except for my sales team, we're using AI in a lot of different places.
All right. Thanks, Renee. Appreciate that. Kirk, let me come back to you. What specific economic indicators are you watching most closely right now, and how are they influencing your leading decisions and portfolio strategy?
Oh, great question. Craig, I mean, obviously right now we're all keeping a close eye on, inflation and unemployment, and those two, are the key metrics that the Fed looks at, as they're making their assessment to manage rates. So we're keeping a close eye on that. And again, it feeds into the real GDP forecast, which is one of the things I keep an eye on, just because our industry correlates, pretty closely with, the growth or contraction in GDP. And again, for first quarter of 25, that was if you looked at GDP, it was -2, and that was mainly driven by the impact of tariffs because of net imports. Right now, for second quarter, projections are about 1.4%. And again, that gets back to, let's look at the resiliency in the economy. Again, the underlying fundamentals seem to still be there outside of some of the noise. So, again, hopefully we feel like that growth rate's going to hold throughout the second half of 25. And again, other things we look at, or I look at, again, the ELFA CapEx Finance Index and Monthly Confidence Index. I mean, that gives you a bit of an insight, into what the industry is doing and what other thought leaders are looking at. And again, they kind of correlate with what we're seeing in the GDP, and that right now everything just kind of seems to be in a bit of a holding pattern, and most folks are kind of expecting flat or moderate growth, over the second half of the year. So, and then again, we can get more granular depending upon the industry, looking at different transportation indexes, looking at shipping indexes, looking at, chassis moves and things like that. That give you a real feel for, what, as leading indicators of our economy of, kind of what's coming down the road in 6 to 9 months.
Okay. Appreciate that, Kirk. I was looking for, I think there was a question that had came in from the attendees that was talking about the view or the perceptions of solar or green energy and the overall impact of the current administration's position on that. Is there any particular interest or increased visibility on either of those green energy aspects? Do you see that increasing or decreasing? I'll leave that open to the panel at this point.
Well, let me jump in there because this is kind of a real-time question for us. As you may or may not know, we launched a renewable energy platform last year. Again, found the right individual with the right experience to help us navigate this world. And again, our focus has mainly been on the solar and distributed energy side, not on the wind-driven side. I think, solar is making up a larger and larger percentage of energy production in the U.S. I don't know that people realize this. Being a Texan, a native Texan, Texas is now one of the leading solar energy providers in the U.S. And it now provides 28% of the energy demand for Texas alone, which the oil and gas industry wouldn't like, but that's what's going on. So right now, obviously, with the bills that are going through Congress, a lot of that's being driven by the investment tax credit incentives, and again, kind of real time, we're seeing definite pushback on the residential side of it, but it may be that the commercial side gets looped in there as well. I think, and again, just reading the tea leaves, I think there will be some sort of support for that sector, the commercial renewable side, just because, again, I get back to solar. It's pretty broad based throughout our economy. It kind of transcends whether you're a red state, blue state. The energy demands of this country going forward, I mean, are expected to double by 2050. And right now, we don't have the existing sources to meet that demand. So they're gonna continue to need a renewable piece of the overall picture to meet that. So I think, one way or the other, whether subsidies go away or not, that industry is here to stay. And again, it may be that the states start picking up some of that incentive if the federal government steps aside.
Appreciate that, Kirk, and that was all very valuable. I appreciate it. I am a little bit concerned, though, that you buried the lead that you're actually from Texas. I don't think any of us really realized that. So thanks for Miles. Given the recent economic volatility, how have you adjusted your underwriting criteria, and are you seeing different risk profiles emerge in your decision base, in your customer base? Miles, that's you.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. And, I think that Renee touched on some of these points earlier when she was talking about, how and where AI is being used in the analysis work. So again, we are certainly seeing various influences. Like Kirk said earlier, again, I think portfolios are holding up pretty well against what was anticipated. So expectation versus reality is certainly a difference here. We are seeing certain sectors where there's been elevated filing and activity. Hospitality would be a good example of an arena where we saw some continued weakness that's been happening there. Franchise space, quick serve restaurants, you see that happening. Just to highlight a couple, transportation, we've seen some challenges there, and we've seen some falling prices around used equipment and all. So those are the pieces that we've been kind of monitoring and keeping track of, for example. And so what we've done, you know, typical to most organizations is you react based upon, you know, how things are trending and all. So we're no different than anybody else. We're seeing certain areas where we have taken the opportunity to, you know, really be a little bit more conservative in our underwriting there. And, you know, I think it's validated, but that's an ongoing process that we undertake all the time. This isn't something that's just unique to a particular timeline or a time frame where we are today, but we're constantly always measuring, monitoring where things are and how we should be adjusting our underwriting accordingly. So I think the end result is that what Renee highlighted in the ability to be able to have more real-time, quick-time feedback is allowing us to shorten the cycles to make some of those adjustments. And I think that we're no different than other people. And I think the end result is that strengthening our abilities to be able to better underwrite business more efficiently, more timely, and more accurately.
And that's, is that, like Renee mentioned, where AI has played a role for you as well in that?
Yeah, we're looking at all, you know, again, you can layer in so many different facets of information and look for commonalities and look for where weaknesses are. And those are the things that, you know, you're able to do. Whereas historically, if you looked at one or two dimensions of data, you know, you had to then apply, you know, multiple facets to bring that data together. So between that and Python and some of the other data tools that we utilize here at Leaf, it's really strengthening our underwriting and enabling us to stay on top of, you know, where portfolios need to perform.
Great. Thanks, Miles. We are, to go back to a horse terminology, we're just past the 3/4 pole, so we're looking down the home stretch here. So I'll try to get through a few more of these questions before we conclude. Kirk, let me come back to you. What advantages do you maintain over private credit providers in serving equipment finance customers?
Thanks, Craig. Well, you know, again, being a part of a bank, we have a cost advantage. I mean, we have one of the lowest costs of capital out there, and so that gives us a distinct advantage. But the flip side is being part of a bank, you're also part of a regulated entity, and so that brings, you know, a set of parameters that you have to work with. So you know, again, can't be all thing to all people. You know, private credit, you know, I mean, it's here to stay, and it's still, you know, needs to be sorted out. I mean, it's already making a big impact on our industry, and if you take a step back and look over a longer time horizons, you know, sources of capital have kind of come in and gone out of this industry. You know, for many years, it was the industrial companies, you know, the GEs, the ITTs, folks like that, that were bringing capital to provide lending and leasing solutions to their clients. And then the banks kind of started moving into this market and understanding what leasing was all about, and they became very big. Insurance providers have come in and provided, but again, they kind of come and go. And private credit, I see, is kind of the same thing. Right now, there is a huge influx of that. It's you know, backing a lot of companies, and it has a place to play. But over time, that's going to refine itself. Not all private credit, you know, will think about this industry the same way, and it won't necessarily meet their requirements. So over time, you know, it'll level out. The question will become, you know, again, is as private credit plays not only in our industry but in others is, what what regulatory impact will arise. Again, we saw it through the 08-09 crisis. You had a lot of non-regulated lenders lending and help create, the issues there. So will private credit kind of come through the same thing? Will there be some regulatory oversight be brought into them? Who knows? But again, at the end of the day, private credit's here. They have a role to play. They address a certain segment of the market, and we need it. So.
Thanks, Kurt. Miles, any difference or anything else you want to add from your bank perspective?
I think that we look at there's pros and cons to private credit, and where they have opportunities to win. I think that I look at this as to what happened when fintech came in a number of years ago, and there were opportunities that they were able to generate that brought business over to them. I think the key that we look at here is that competition is good from the standpoint that it helps us to all be sharper and on our games and really help provide the best experience for customers out there and really helps to advance the causes of the market. So I'm never afraid of competition that way. I think what it allows us to be able to do is to make sure that we're delivering the best capabilities to our partners out there. We're a vendor-oriented shop very heavily. So all of our vendor partners that we work with are end users, and it makes us operationally more in tune internally. So I think those are all good things. And, I'm optimistic that we'll see this to help us all do better.
Great. Thanks, Miles. Renee, what are you doing from a leadership standpoint to keep engagement levels high, all stakeholders in the game, and your culture proactive and positive in the current environment so you're well positioned for a successful future?
Thanks. In the current environment, it's a really interesting question because we're dealing with obviously still demands for hybrid work, working remotely. Us as a culture, our organization, culture is really key. And one of the unique things about Auxilior is that we have maintained a premise-based organization from the start. And we are exclusively premise-based. We don't encourage employees to be hybrid or remote, which I think in the current environment makes us a little unique. We think that uniqueness has actually created a tighter workforce and a sense of community inside the organization. We hire a lot of young people into the industry, and we've able to experience them learning faster, solving problems quicker, and just biased from my perspective. I think an organization that is together generally innovates faster and can be responsive faster. We'll continue to hire great people that see this environment as innovative and unique. And really opportunistic in the current environment. So we think we're well positioned for a successful future because we're together, and that's important to all of us.
Thanks, Renee. I know all three of you have mentioned culture and people as key components to the reasons you're successful and your optimism for growth, whether it's, no matter what is happening out there in the economy, the industry will find a path, will pivot to what's working, and obviously having the good quality personnel and solid cultures. All three of you represent three companies that stand as leaders in that aspect. So appreciate that thought. Kirk, do you have anything that you want to support or jump on to that aspect?
Yeah, Craig, I mean, again, we're a little bit different. We started out as all premises based 10 years ago, but then again, through COVID and other things, we became more of a hybrid workforce where we have people now located all over the US. And quite frankly, when we started this business 10 years ago, we were remote from the bank because the bank is basically a Chicago bank and we're down in Texas. So, we've been working through that remote work environment almost from the beginning. And again, I think the key is you have to be thoughtful and intentional in making sure that you are bringing people together, that you are, over communicating, that you create those opportunities for the team to have physical presence. And so I think, again, it's just the marketplace today for employees and quality employees and what their expectations are. You kind of have to meet them where they are. And so, one of the advantages is of having a remote workforce is now you're not limited to just your local work pool or having to move somebody in. You can find those people wherever they are, and then leverage technology. And so for us, it's worked. And we were fortunate. We had a pretty strong culture pre-COVID, and we've been able to hold on to that and nurture that and continue to grow and have success. So communication's key.
Yeah, yeah, we could do another whole event on this topic, I think. And I know, Kirk, you and I had talked a lot about, when you're doing a remote culture and you're building that, the idea is I think you and I have shared the three pillars that I look to, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if you can define those three in great detail, everybody then, really can live up to matching the culture, even if they're not there. But great perspectives, both from Renee's in-house and Kirk's, and I'm sure that touches a lot of people all across the spectrum that were in attendance right now. So we're nearing the close, and I want to thank everybody. Your insights have been tremendous, and really appreciate your time and your talent that you've shared. I'm going to end with an open question to everybody, and try to measure it a little bit because I probably have run a few minutes a little bit longer. But so the final closing question I have is, what is one piece of advice that you would share with the audience on how to best navigate the current market conditions with a view to coming out with a positive momentum? So, Renee, I'll let you start and keep it as brief as possible, but please address that for the audience.
I'll keep it very brief. And my view is that you should monitor risks, but don't overreact.
Thank you. Miles, how about you?
Listen to your customers and listen to your staff and blend those together to come out with the best course of action.
Great, great. And Kirk, I'll give you the final word.
Thanks, Craig. And that would be, basically stick to your core objectives and your strategic plan. Don't jerk the wheel. Again, we've seen a lot of events over the past 30 years, Y2K, 9/11, market collapse of 08, 09, oil and gas peaks and valley. The key is this industry adapts, the people adapt, but don't lose focus on what your key value adds are.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And for those questions that came in that I was not able to work into the conversation, I apologize. Thanks to all of you who submitted that. My thanks again to the panelists. All three of you were amazing. To the monitor, Lisa, we really appreciate this opportunity. We hope that we provided some great content that each and every one of you who have given your time benefited from it. So with that, I'll sign off and wish everybody a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.